Good morning, buddy. I see you. Hey there. We're at Sunfish Pond, an ancient glacial lake. I've heard it gets pretty rocky.
Oh, freaking course.
And here is the evidence. See, New Jersey has rocks too.
No rocks in New Jersey. No, just shit I know. Non-rock.
I don't know how well this is going to come out, but the whole rim of the Sunfish Pond is lined with that mountain laurel, which is maybe at peak or just past peak. A lot of the flowers are white and pink and falling to the ground now, starting to fall to the ground. It's a beautiful morning. Shame we have to walk so far. Hello, buddy. Your spines are up. You're not moving.
It's the middle of the day. I'm worried about you a bit.
You don't look like you're healthy. You'd have moved on, wouldn't you? I know you can't shoot your spines at me, but I don't want to get too close to you. Want me to film your final demise?
Okay.
He's giving you that side eye.
Kind of reason.
Well, he is moving.
He's got them all pricked up in the back here.
Yeah. See you later, buddy. Without falling down. What's the name of this hill? Raccoon Ridge. We have been mostly in a green canopy all day. It's our first big view. On the way to grilled cheese sandwiches. That's a mighty fine work, Mr. Beaver. Mrs. Beaver. Whatever Beaver. I think I'm going to pass on the water though. Well, just finished second lunch. Had a little bit of a climb up around Crater Lake. It's been about 15.5 miles so far today. We're going to push 5 more to make it to the next actual shelter rather than campsite. Hopefully the remaining 5 miles are like this so we can make them in good time. It'll be only my second 20-mile day, but they're getting easier. Some more mountain laurel. So yesterday I said that maybe I could try and talk about a story I've been thinking about. The importance of story. And, you know, at our church, High Rock, We have a lot of life stories. We put them in videos. We use them in a lot of our classes. We find them to be very helpful. But it's more than just that. You see, there's a lot of different ways of communicating different kinds of information. And story is one of them. And what story communicates better than any other format is identity. Who you are, what you're about. And unlike many other forms of communicating information, you cannot rush a story. Like sometimes people will watch YouTube videos that are informational at 1.25 or 1.5 or even double speed. You can get that information all in a shorter amount of time. But if you do that with a story, you lose all the emotional impact. You cannot fast forward the emotional journey of a story. It has to play out at its own speed. But this bit about story as identity, you think about how the government, for instance, identifies you. You might have a social security number. You have a state ID like a driver's license. Think about it's got your height, your weight, your hair color, a picture there. All the information on there that's necessary to identify you is actually, probably none of it is how you identify yourself. You think about if someone's trying to get to know you or you're trying to get to know them, that's not the information you communicate. What you're going to communicate to the other person and want to hear from the other person is a story, a series of events and relationships that leads and decisions that leads to the person they now are. So why is that important? Well, first of all, it's important that you know your own story. And I find so many people don't have a sense of their own story. But more than that, think about how God chooses to communicate identity. Many religious texts are filled with philosophies or numbered teachings, dialects. But the scriptures, the Judeo-Christian scriptures, come to us. Now, it contains teachings. It contains elements of philosophy and pragmatic wisdom. But in the end, our scriptures come to us as a story. They are the story, well, in part of us in our relationship with God, but they are first and foremost the self-revelation of God. God revealing who God is to us. And that's why story is so important. And I'm going to pick up on that later by talking about what makes a bad story and a good story, and how that relates to us and art and even Rick and Morty. All right, better pay attention to where I'm going here. You know what, it's getting late in the day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to what makes a good and a bad story and Rick and Morty and all that. So I'm going to just give kind of one practical implication of the importance of story and how story reveals who we are and how we, and our emotional content and all of that. And that's simply when we ask each other questions, to start asking questions that elicit a story. So for instance, instead of just saying, "So, how was your day?" you might say, "Hey, tell me about one person you talked to today." That invites a story. Or you might say, "Tell me about one thing that went well today or went poorly today." I think you can get the idea. But even in some deeper conversations, it's a really important distinction. I remember when I first was becoming a parent, I made a pledge. just to me and to God, that I would do my best to never say, what is wrong with you? And I can tell you, as a parent, as a human being, as a fallen creature, it's sometimes tempting to ask that question when someone does something that so defies logic and reason. And you say, what is wrong with you? But it's such a condemning statement, and it leaves nowhere to go. There's nothing you can answer to that. Instead, I've asked different questions, and one of them that I've learned from trauma response training, because people who've been exposed to trauma will often behave in ways that don't make sense. At least they don't make sense to us, because our experience is different than theirs. And so the question to ask then is, tell me, what happened to you? And that's a question that invites a story. And it invites a story that helps us to understand why what they are doing makes sense somehow to them, even if it doesn't truly make sense in the larger picture. Like when people with abandonment issues will sabotage relationships before other people can leave them. It doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? What's wrong with you? But instead, if you ask, hey, tell me, what happened to you that makes you want to do this? Well, that's inviting a story that helps you understand why they do what they do and why it makes sense to them. But also, it can create the invitation to enter into that person's story and start to challenge certain elements of it so that they can have a different story in order to make meaning of their experience. Maybe there's a larger story that doesn't end with abandonment, but ends with redemption and relationship. So anyway, I will continue talking about the importance of story, but maybe a place to start is in your own relationships, to start asking those around you, especially those whom you really want to know, start asking them questions that invite them to share their story. And really listen. It is a precious, precious, holy thing when someone opens up to us and lets us into their heart, into their lives by sharing their story. So I encourage you to treat it that way. And of course, it is an incredibly precious thing that God does the same for us, opening up God's heart that we might enter into God's story. But more on that another time.